Another week, we're all back together for an episode of Going Nowhere. And I think we can talk about a few different things again today with our guest, Paul, with us. And I think the topic of discussion for today's podcast can be about mental health. I'm sure both of you have your views on it, and we can have a good conversation regarding mental health. And I was going to ask Paul if you want to start with telling us a little bit about his background and his knowledge of mental health.
Okay, well, I was a mental health nurse for 37 years.
Wow.
Started back in 88. Of course, things were a lot different back then to what they are now. So your generation probably wouldn't know the sort of mental health rules and things that went on back then, because it's all changed so much. Some of it, the vast majority, for the better.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a few things that could still see with some improvement on it.
Interesting.
Well, some things have got worse since you started, or there's still some things you think need to
I
be
still think
changed?
that there are some things that still need to improve, especially, one of the areas is medication, because unfortunately, the use of medication comes along with side effects on the human body. The medication itself is quite rough, and you're curing or treating one thing for another thing to start. You're reducing, say, the psychosis of somebody, but you're causing obesity in some, not all people, but in some. Yeah. And other sort of side effects that go along with that. I know most medications have side effects, but they're not as rough as some of the medication that can be used in mental health. And I guess the nice thing is now that some of the newer medications are cross illness medications. So they're used to treat both physical conditions as well as the mental health side. So that side effects in those aren't quite as bad.
So you're saying you take a medication for, say, anxiety or depression, but there's also built in something which helps reduce the physical side effects?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, there are medications that can be given to people to reduce the side effects, one of them being procyclidine, and you can get that in tablet form or injection form. But that's just more substance placed within the system that the body's already having problems adjusting to substances. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest changes that came about was when I first started, we didn't have psychology. It didn't really exist in this country. You had some private practitioners, but in the NHS, it didn't really exist. So most people would come into hospital, they'd be treated, and then they'd be sent home under the care of their GP, because there wasn't even community services back then. Where today, we've got the full range of treatments, both medication, and psychological.
Yes, it does sound in many ways it's much better, but I think many people's perception is things are getting worse on the mental health front. Maybe the treatment's getting better, but the problem is growing disproportionately more than the treatments are able to catch up.
I think one of the problems is, again, that when I started, there was only less than a handful of diagnoses, where today they're coming up with new diagnoses for new illnesses. But then society and the world around us has changed. They're understanding more about the effects of trauma, and how that can affect us in later life. I think when I started, I think it was mainly we dealt with in hospital settings anyway, was the schizophrenic, manic depression, or bipolar, those sort of illnesses. But of course, today you've got so many more. You've got the anxieties, you've got the PTSDs, you've got the EUPDs. As we come to understand mental health more, we're getting new diagnoses.
Do you think that the new diagnoses are just being identified? I mean, do you think they were always there and they have just now been given names, or they are completely new just because of where our society is today and all the pressure that people are in and how our society has changed?
I think a number of them have been there all along, just not recognised. So they were tagged onto the known illnesses like schizophrenia, bipolar, and the likes. But I think that because the way society is today, how is it they say it? The politically correct society, people are carrying around a lot more anxiety, and this in itself can lead on to other effects. Somebody that's always anxious could go hand in hand with depression. It's a difficult one, but I think society as it is today, the amount of pressure that is put on an individual, both by others and themselves, causes a lot of problems.
Do you think that's mostly economic/work pressure? Is that the predominant one, or is there more?
Educational, work, everyday life. Everyday life can cause anxiety, depression. It's how we as individuals treat ourselves.
So when you were treating people, did you notice that there was a certain age group which was much more likely to you were much more likely to go to because presumably they are suffering from more mental health problems? And did you notice that after a certain age, say like 70, when maybe work is not such a central focus, you were treating less people who are above 70?
Unfortunately, things like schizophrenia and bipolar is a lifelong illness. Yeah, we can treat the symptoms, we can't treat the illness, as they say.
Yeah.
We can't cure it, but we can treat the symptoms. But like any illness, every so often you have a breakthrough, which is the way I mean that the illness itself breaks through that barrier, and they go through a period of being unwell.
Like breakouts?
Sorry?
Would you say breakouts in their illness?
Yeah, and unfortunately, as I said, because some of these illnesses are lifelong illnesses, even somebody in their 70s or 80s, will still need treatments at time and potentially need to be hospitalised. I mean, I know today with teams like home treatments, crisis teams, that sort of thing, a lot more people are being able to be treated in the comfort of their homes. People recover better in familiar surroundings. There's also, I guess, a less chance of someone picking up on behaviours that can occur in a clinical setting.
So you're saying there's a positive and a negative to treating at home, because in one sense you're putting people in a more familiar environment, but also you're not able to observe them so much, so you might miss stuff.
Yes. One of the things with bipolar, for instance, is that the client will react to stimulus. Now, in a hospital setting, you can reduce a certain amount of stimulus. In a person's own home, especially if they live with somebody or live with others, you can't go in and reduce that stimulus. With home treatment, the expectation of that was to try to avoid hospital admission so that people maybe recovered a bit faster, a bit better, maybe responded better to the treatment. But it's, as you said, there is the difficulty with that is that you may see them for an hour a day. In some cases, you may do a twice daily visit, depending on the level of their illness at that particular time. You also run the risk of more incidents happening because there's not that sort of supervision that there would be in a hospital. So, although the treatments at home are a great improvement on hospital, I think hospitals still have their places.
Yeah, so if people still got the option if they did want to be treated at hospital for whatever reason, maybe if they find their home environment actually not very good, and just maybe other people in it which are just causing them to react.
One of the things to use hospital for, or that could be used for, is taking somebody out of the environment that is escalating their illness, and that could be many different things. That could be, their mania increasing, their aggressive behaviour increasing in the environment of home or general public areas. So bringing them into hospital, that can be reduced, and it doesn't have to be like a long stay. It could be a week, it could be 10 days. Because now we've got the facilities to support them on their release from hospital. Where back in the day when I started, it was like, because there was no community services for mental health, a person would come into hospital and they could be there for 6 months, a year.
Wow.
And that's an informal patient. That's aside from someone being held on the Mental Health Act, detained.
Would you like to tell us the difference between someone who is detained under the Mental Health Act and someone who is just a patient, as you said right now?
So an informal patient is somebody that is admitted with their consent. They've agreed to come into hospital and receive treatment. Somebody that is detained under the Mental Health Act is somebody that is deemed unwell and in a position that they could be a risk to themselves and maybe others. But because they're refusing to come into hospital for treatment, they can use what is called the Mental Health Act, Section 3. So Section 2 is a section, a holding power for 28 days. They're detained in hospital for up to 28 days. Section 3 is a treatment section, and this can last for up to 6 months. At any time, that section can be rescinded by the appropriate practitioner, clinician. Vice versa, it can be increased. The doctor can apply for a further section. To be placed on a section, it has to be overseen by 2 doctors and a social worker. But I believe just recently, nurses can also now be involved in section.
So I was reading a story recently about someone who had a lot of physical issues, and that was the reason of them losing weight, I think, in that case. And they ended up being sectioned just because they thought that they had mental health issues that were causing this loss of weight. Do you think that this is something that happens often? Someone having physical issues and they get put under a section and losing their liberties effectively without actually being mentally ill but having an underlying physical health condition?
Well, I mainly worked in adult mental health, 18 to whatever age. It used to be 18 to 65, then they went under elderly care, but they've expanded that now. So there's no upper age limit on adult mental health. I only ever came across two cases where a section was used for somebody that had an eating disorder. Because of their eating disorder, it was causing a number of physical disorders. And because of Section 3 allows the use of treatment, I believe that's why they can hold somebody on a 3 and do a gastronasal tube, I believe, or IV fluids.
Is that effectively provide them nutrition through a tube then?
Yeah. But as I said, I've only ever come across two clients in the 37 years that I worked. The first one, although it was on a section, the client also had a mental health disorder. So this person was actually on a section, which meant that we were able to restrict their movements, basically kept them on bed rest and under constant supervision throughout the day and night. But I do believe that a section can be used to provide treatment. So that could be, as I said, nasal feeds or IV feeds.
So as you said, a section can be used to limit someone's freedoms, obviously, and be kept into hospital against their will, in this case. Do you think that the use of a section for patients has increased nowadays than the time that you started 37 years ago?
No, when I started, it was routinely used. Although even back then, it still had to be 2 doctors and a social worker. I do think, personally, it was overused. And many a time, the section was rescinded within a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, and the person went home. I don't think it's as routinely used today, in the last decade, because of the further understanding of mental health itself. The Mental Health Act itself, when I first started it, it was the 63 Mental Health Act. Then it went to, I think, 83. They reviewed it, and they've since reviewed it again and updated it. They have more rights in that they can appeal against the section now and actually even get a solicitor to take the case to argue why they shouldn't be on a section. And that's an independent service away from sort of the doctors that are actually on their case. So, yeah, I would say that the use of mental health in this decade has been a lot less.
That's interesting. I guess it's a lot of people's worst nightmare, perhaps, to feel that they're going to be, they could have their liberties taken away from them, especially if they're in a vulnerable state anyway. To effectively, what they might see as lock you down can perhaps exacerbate any mental health problem as well. Obviously, it's designed to help, but I know even visiting care homes, you hear people feel like they're trapped there. Not always, but sometimes people can be quite vocal and want to get out, and they just got no way to get out. So
yeah, I think vulnerable adult, because that's all I can really speak about, but where vulnerable adults are concerned, I think as a society we have a duty of care, and that duty of care may be that we have to take the responsibility away from an individual who doesn't have the capacity to give or make the right decisions. I know as individuals we should have the right to make our own choices regardless of what they are. We're all entitled to make bad choices, but there's making a bad choice and facing the consequence of that, when we're not classed as vulnerable. But when we're classed as vulnerable and we make a bad choice, the consequences could be much worse. So there are times when, as a collective, the mental health services have to take that responsibility and say, For this moment in time, for here and now, today, we are taking control. Tomorrow is a different question, because tomorrow the person could have the ability to make a choice. But here now, in this moment in time, when we are reviewing that client, or it was felt that their capacity was one where the choices they potentially could make could be life-threatening, both to them and to others.
You talked to us that you obviously treated people from the ages of 18 up to, old age. Would you say throughout your career, did you notice younger adults, for example, coming up more frequently into mental health services? Because I think these days there's a lot of talk about young people's mental health being worse than it used to be in the past.
I think pressure on youngsters and expectations, both their own and those of their peers and adults, is making it more difficult mental health wise for them. So yes, we are seeing more in that category, but also the fact that, again, society has changed. Things that have caused them traumas are looked at with more empathy, with more sympathy, where from my generation, if someone came forward and said ABC, it was shut up.
Or laughter.
Yeah, basically. So my generation, my parents' generation, and all that was told, shut up, get on with it,
The stiff upper lip attitude. And
Yes.
maybe you could make the argument we've gone too far the other way. I don't know if you see any of that, but obviously it seems like a good thing we've come away from that.
Personally, and this is my personal thinking, not anything to do with the NHS or mental health itself. I think we've become a bit of a nanny state in we're cuddling them too much. It's one thing to give somebody an outlet to express their mental health, which we all deserve, but to, in a way, pamper to that. I think we've gone a bit too far that way.
Do you think that has the effect of actually exacerbating mental health problems?
Yeah. You get a group of individuals. Yeah, this is again my opinion. In today's society, you get one individual that's getting all the attention because of the acts that they are doing. Others see this and think, I want that attention. So they're going to follow. Instead of saying, yes, you're having a difficult time. Yes, you may need to have some form of therapy, medication, talk therapies, all those sort of things.
And what techniques can someone who is suffering from self-harming can use to kind of avoid self-harming when they're feeling this way, you found?
Well, I've noticed, or I've seen, different apps online. Mindfulness is one of them. And these help someone to attempt to focus their thoughts better. But it also can give them techniques such as the elastic band. You place a tight elastic band around the wrist, and when you get that feeling of wanting to self-harm, you flick it. And it stings. It does. It stings on this part of the wrist. Another technique is ice. You hold an ice cube in your hand and crush it. It burns. It doesn't leave any marks, doesn't blister or anything, but it burns.
Yeah.
All these can be an alternative to actually cutting. But I think we have to remember that we still need to get to the root cause of why.
Yeah, and is that usually some sort of trauma?
Yeah, and individuals may not be ready to actually look at those traumas and let alone speak about them.
Do you think there's anything that might like, because obviously trauma is a massive problem. It doesn't look like it's an easy one to solve. Do you think there's any potential treatments that might come down the line in 10 years, say, which might have a big effect?
It's, again, at the moment, it's just about treating the symptoms. Medication in mental health has its place. Like in any illness, medication has its role. It's using known techniques like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, or DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, to help the individual to understand where these emotions are coming from, why they're getting these emotions, why they're coming out in the form that they are, and then how to reduce those and to be able to cope better with them.
Yeah, so I guess CBT and some sort of mindfulness can probably help each other. So the more mindful you are, then the more the CBT is going to work, and the more you are aware of what the thought patterns and problems are, then you can that helps mindfulness.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing to avoid is meditation, internal meditation, because the last thing that they want, and the last thing you want, is for them to start going into the mind and confronting some of those thoughts. That can make the issue 100 times worse. But there's lots of things that come along with mindfulness that can be used. Focus meditation, audio meditation, where you listen to music and focus on that rather than the sounds that are going on in your head.
Yeah, no, I've had someone close to me recently, the last year, has been struggling with mental health problems, and she's found this really relaxing. I think it's Classic FM Relax, something like that. It's not the main station, but it's a substation on one of these apps, and that's really helped. Just when the things it just gets a bit too, life gets away from you, and you're like, I just need to come back to a safe place, and just this music can it's not like a miracle cure, but it does help.
It's enough that at times it can distract. And distraction is always a good thing. Maybe not in everyday life, but in mental health, distraction is good.
I guess it stops spiraling any further.
Yeah, because they stop sort of concentrating or focusing on what's going on. You've distracted them away from that. And it could be as simple as listening to an audiobook or doing some baking or running a hoover around the house. Something that you have to concentrate on that's going to distract from in here.
Yeah, I wonder what those activities are like whether they're sort of maybe analogous to flow activities, in terms of you having flow activities have to have a goal. They have to be between not too stressful but also not too boring. So I guess if you could find something in that Goldilocks zone, and maybe some people would say housework is too boring, but yeah, I don't know. Like, some people like housework, so I guess it's what works for you.
It's, as an individual, you find what helps you best. Yeah, there's no point in putting if you're going to put an outcome on it, the likelihood is that you're not going to achieve that. Yeah. So running a hoover around, it doesn't matter if you do it for 1 minute or 5 minutes.
Yeah. So it's more just for starting to do some job.
Yeah.
It's not about getting to the end, and that actually thinking of getting to the end might put you off trying it, because you always associate jobs with having to get to a certain point.
Yeah. But also, if you don't end it, you then put extra pressure on yourself and extra stress, because I didn't achieve that. Why did I bother starting?
Yeah.
So it's simple things, and it's like I say, one of the techniques we used to use was, because a lot of people with mental health have a problem with concentration. They'll start something, 2 minutes later they're doing something else, then they're doing something else. one of the ways to rebuild your concentration or help you to start your concentration is to set a task for 5 minutes, or read a book, one chapter or 2 pages, whatever. Once you get to that 5 minutes, even though you may want to read the next page, you put the book down and you go and have a coffee or a cup of tea or go to the bathroom. Then you come back and you do another 5 minutes. And then the following day, you increase that to 7 minutes. So you read a book for 7 minutes.
So, in a way, the way to recovery is building up healthier habits in a way that take you away from almost, I think of it as the bad habits of ruminating in bad thoughts or repeating bad habits that build up while we are in that bad mental health state, I suppose.
Yes. It's like anything, healthy lifestyle. I know that I have to reduce intake to lose weight. Somebody with mental health has to reduce stimuli and increase positivity. It's difficult because even just sat here, sat in your own lounge, there's still things going on, especially if you're with somebody, the TV's on, the radio's on, yeah? You're reading a book, you can hear your neighbours screaming and shouting. It doesn't shut down. So you have to almost try and put a physical filter on of your own design, of your own making, to help reduce that stimuli, to help reduce what's going on around you. If that means taking yourself out of that room into another room, do it. One of the things that unfortunately, a lot of mental health patients find is the lack of sleep. It's not that they don't sleep. They feel they don't sleep. They don't have a restful sleep. But if someone's not sleeping, there's no point in encouraging them to stay in bed. So, again, you put plans in place. Like, for me, for instance, I don't always sleep that well. So I will get up, I'll come downstairs, I'll make myself a milky drink, or I know I shouldn't because it's a stimulant, but a coffee. I'll have another stimulant, I'll have a cigarette. But I will keep myself away from my bed for at least an hour. Go back and then start again. It tricks the body into thinking, well, I've been up, so it must be bedtime. It tricks the mind thinking, oh, I've just been doing this, so yes, I need to now shut down.
Yeah, I think you can put too much pressure on yourself to go to sleep, and maybe even though it's good to stay in a routine, so your circadian rhythm has that to get, and it strengthens over time. But it's also, if you put too much pressure on yourself to say, oh, I need to get to bed at this time, otherwise I'm not going to have a good day tomorrow, then yeah, that's probably going to make your sleep quality worse.
But in a way, you're saying to yourself, when you say, oh, if I don't get the sleep, I'm going to have a bad day. You're actually saying, I'm going to have a bad day tomorrow, because I couldn't sleep.
Yeah, which is it's not guaranteed. Like,
no.
We can get away with less sleep than we think, at least for one night, maybe 2 nights. Like, we don't act like that 8 hours is great to have, but we can get away with, I think for 2 nights, you can get away with about 6 hours, and you'll probably even less, but and you'll recover. But if you're in this mindset of, you're telling yourself, I'm feeling tired, so I didn't have enough sleep, and that makes things worse.
I think one of the things that I learned over the whole of the years that I worked in mental health was listen to your body, listen to your mind. It will tell you what it needs. If you find yourself with excess energy, that you're flitting from one thing to another, it's telling you, I need a bit more exercise. I need to expand more of that inner energy. Because, to be honest, The sedate nature of society today, I think we said it once before, I don't have to go outside my front door to get all my life needs. Yeah. But I've still got all this energy and it needs to go somewhere. If you're not expanding it, if you're not getting rid of it, you're not going to sleep. You're not going to rest. You're not going to relax. So if my body's flitting, I know I've got to go for a walk, or I've got to go to the gym, and have a bit of a workout. If I'm tired, I'll put my hands up and I'm honest. If I'm tired, I'll have a nap, even if that's in the afternoon. I'll have an hour. I'll still sleep at night, but at that moment in time, I needed a nap.
Yeah, it's listening to your body. I guess the problem in modern society is sometimes you can't always listen to your body if you've got set work schedules or you've got family commitments. I mean, it's just a bit more difficult. But yeah, I think
you have to
if you can,
have to work around them.
Yeah.
I worked for 37 years in the NHS. Set work. Well, I won't say a set work pattern, because I worked sort of early shifts, late shifts, night shifts, intermediate shifts, that sort of thing. But I was still able to find 5 minutes or 10 minutes for me in that shifts. Yes, okay, it may have been to go and get one of these. It may have been an extra trip to the bathroom. But I was able to, and I was able to listen to what I needed. If there were times that patient, client made me feel emotional, then there was no point in me coming out of that session straight into a next one, because I'm just carrying those emotions in with me. So I had to take 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And I think you'll find that the majority of companies will allow you to take that 5 minutes, even if, as I said, it is an extra trip to the bathroom. But we need to, as a society, understand that we have individual needs that override society's needs.
You mentioned just now how important physical exercise can be for people who are struggling with mental health. I think it's just as important as you mentioned. I find it from personal experience, whenever I'm feeling stressed or I'm feeling that I'm struggling or I feel like I want to release my energy, working out does help me both bring my stress down and also release the excess energy that I feel like I have inside me, and I need to kind of find an outlet for it. So I feel like having a long run, for example, really helps me clear my mind half the times and like take a step back if necessary and evaluate different things. So I do think that very often people underestimate how helpful exercise can be and how much it can kind of help you regulate on a day-to-day basis. Because as you said, we are a very sedentary society, that people mostly work in an office these days and don't release all of that energy, and then you end up getting home and you just go to bed and then start over again. So having this kind of break can really help.
But it also, I mean, I'm almost 60 and I had such a sedative life. I wouldn't exercise in the car, even to go to the shop. But recently I became diabetic, and my blood sugar levels have been running in double numbers. And by going to the gym, I was able to bring those levels down. So I was feeling physically much better, much more relaxed, because I'd had a workout. And funny enough, it made me feel more energetic. Even though I've just expanded a lot of energy doing a 5K walk, I felt more awake, more in the moment.
Yeah, sometimes when I feel tired in a day, it's you assume you need to go to sleep, but actually sometimes you can feel, if you go and do some jobs or you go for a run or go for a walk, then you actually feel after an hour later or half an hour later, I'm no longer feeling that tiredness, where we assume we need that sleep to be able to catch up. That's not to say that naps are never good, and I often take naps, but there's always maybe it's sometimes worth trying the physical thing first. Like, there's not that much to lose from doing even like 15 minutes of exercise, or 15 minutes of a job, and then see if you still feel tired. And then if you do still feel tired, then you can take a nap.
One of the things I found really useful for myself, both physically and mentally, is audiobooks.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah, I've heard
because I
audiobooks
find,
and jigsaws. That's a popular one.
yeah, or colouring, adult colouring.
Yeah.
But, you know, with the audiobooks, I can plug myself in, ignore what's going on around me, and just focus on the story.
Yeah.
It doesn't, you know, I'm still old fashioned. I like a book in my hand. I just can't read them these days with my eyes. But plugging myself in, putting the book on the treadmill, I don't even realise I'm walking. You know, because I'm focusing on that book, and because I've shut the outside world off, I feel much better in myself. I'm not thinking about what am I going to cook when I get home, or you know what the weather's like. You know, I'm going to get wet walking home because of the rain. I'm just in that moment, in that book.
Yeah. Yeah. Some time
You
for
know,
yourself, which
yeah,
a
because
lot
I'm
of
not
us
thinking of
don't
anything else.
even though we have a lot of entertainments in our culture, often we don't really take enough time just for ourselves,
Yeah.
asking what do we need, and for be in the moment and just do whatever we want to do and not be distracted by
Unfortunately, I know
other
music
thoughts.
has its place. You know, once upon a time, they used to have music therapists within mental health. Yeah, the same as art therapy and all that. But you have to. Sorry, I've forgotten where I was going with that.
But whether music is, I think you might be saying whether music is helpful for mental health or taking your mind off.
What I find with music is that it can be too busy. You got instruments, you got vocals, you've got, do you know what I mean? You've got too many things going on at once. Where with a book, you've got one voice. So you're not listening to trying to filter too many things at once.
Becoming overstimulated by all of them.
I wonder if classical or very calming music, maybe what you'd use in meditation or a yoga session, might be different in that regard, because it's not got all the multiple voices, and it's not there for necessarily entertainment. It's there just to calm you down.
Yeah. When I first started in mental health nursing, I worked on what they call a rehab ward. That was somebody who had gone through their illness, you know, in that particular time, but wasn't quite ready to be able to go home and fend for themselves, because maybe they'd been in hospital for more than 6 months. So they would come to a rehab ward where again they would be helped, assisted in budgeting, cooking, all those sort of things. Skills that you would lose long term in a hospital. And one of the things that we used to do is called relaxation. And basically it was that laying on the floor or on a beanbag, pillows, whatever you had to hand, the practitioner would put I'm showing my age, the tape recorder on, and it would play sounds like wind and water and natural sounds. And then they would lightly talk over that and help somebody, the individuals, or a safe space within their mind, somewhere they could create a safe space. Mine, I went to school in Devon. One of my favourite weekend hobbies was to take my book to an old oak tree that sat on the bank of a river and just sit there and read. So I go there, and because I can still sort of remember the sounds of the water, the sounds of the leaves rustling with the wind, that sort of thing. And that's what you're trying to get somebody to do. I think there was one that used to be, you're on a lake, the waves are choppy. Now use your mind's eye to make that lake glass. So there's no ripples, no waves, nothing. And that's hard to do. That's hard to do if you're in the right frame of mind to begin with.
Yeah.
But when you're stressed, you're not going to do that.
So, do you guys think there is anything we can do as a society to kind of improve people's mental health in, at the societal level for all of us?
Nope.
I mentioned that because I was watching a video the other day that was talking about a very interesting concept by a sociologist named Ray Oldenburg, who talked about the importance of third spaces. So spaces that are not our home and they're not our work. So these spaces can be anywhere like a park or a cafe or anywhere for that matter where we can socialize, exchange ideas, talk to other people, and how in today's society, all of these spaces are shrinking. We don't have spaces that we can just turn up, chat to other people without no strings attached, let's say, and exchange ideas or socialize. And that is making us more isolated and more lonely as a consequence. So they were talking about how by creating more of these spaces would be able to improve people's mental health. And I thought that was a very nice concept.
Yeah. I think sounds like a good thing. I guess. I think we don't have enough activities maybe where we can be playful socially with other people. So it's always serious at work. Not always, but most people expect it to be serious. And then you're at home, and then you just often plug into something which gives you input, which might be playful in terms of an interesting story or whatever is coming into you, but we're not being playful ourselves. And I think to recover some of the playfulness which we've lost, I think that would be of use.
Precisely, this is what the video was talking about, that, for example, the internet has now substituted all of these third spaces and we're just becoming, consuming content and doom scrolling on the internet instead of actually engaging into something that can help us, connect with other people in a way.
I think from my generation, from my perspective, I watched my parents, work 12, 18 hours a day, but still found time to socialize with the neighbors, with family, with friends. Yeah. My generation, we had the same. We had these third places. It may have been one of the local pubs. I'm not encouraging people to drink, but you haven't even got those anymore. Not a pub where you could go and chat because the music's too high. You go in. So what I see today is the internet, social media. That's where people socialize now.
Yeah, I feel maybe it's not got the same quality of it is socializing, but it's missing something crucial. And I guess it's the easy option often, but I think to go out there and out into the real world and socialize with people, there's just something so much more enriching about that and more natural.
You don't even need to go out now to get a girlfriend or boyfriend, or do you know what I mean? Just go online, go on one of the dating apps. I know a lad, he's 30-ish, has had a girlfriend for the last 3 years who lives in America. Never met, but they're boyfriend, girlfriend, or that's how they class themselves. Do you know what I mean? People just aren't connecting the way that we should be, which is together, face to face.
Yeah, there's touch, and then even the shared energies, that sounds really spiritual. We're just like just being with someone. I think nearly everyone admits there's something which is different than if they're even on the other side of a computer screen, or definitely the other side of a messaging service.
People used to go to. I had a job many, many, many moons ago as a bingo hall caller.
Oh yeah.
And people used to come there to socialize. Yes, you had the chance of winning money. Yeah. But people came for the sociability of meeting up with aunties. You know, they used to say it was an old granny's, excuse my language, an old granny's game, because it was usually females that went to the bingo. But you don't even need to do that now because you've got apps online where you can gamble on bingo or slot machines or.
But that's the thing, as you said, internet is taking over, but this is not a third space in this case, you see?
People are losing the ability to socialise face to face. Over the screen, yeah, that's fine. You haven't got to make that connection. Where if you're face to face, you've got to make that connection. You know, I know that the society's rules today aren't helping. Like, I'm a smoker. I choose to have a smoke. I don't do drugs. I don't drink often. I have a cigarette. I can't even do that now. It's frowned upon. I can't sit in a pub and have a cigarette with a pint, chatting with friends. You know, I remember the days when even cinemas, restaurants, you could sit and smoke. Yes, I agree. You shouldn't smoke in restaurants or cinemas. It's too much of an enclosed area. But because it's too frowned upon, people like myself that are smokers, my generation, don't want to go to a pub where you have to go and stand on the doorstep to have a cigarette. You don't want to, have to walk off site to have a cigarette. But because of society's rules, it's better if I stay indoors. I can smoke to my heart's content, drink as much coffee as I like, play a few silly games on the internet. I'm fine.
Yeah, so that's overall, I guess, worse for you rather than if society was just a bit more relaxed and like, unless we're going to get into an authoritarian society, people are always going to smoke or drink or whatever, and our rules about it just probably change where people do it, and maybe I don't think guilt tripping people or looking down on people who because they're a smoker or whatever. I don't think that's helpful.
I'm a nurse. I know the dangers of this. Yeah, I know that the likelihood is that on my death certificate it will have maybe a secondary cause, but it will be there, emphysema, COPD, because it does ruin your lungs. I know that, yeah. But I know of other things that are a lot worse, not only to you as an individual, but to the people around you. You know what I mean? The uses of substances, alcohol, they're much worse than that, when it comes to society.
Yeah, it's got a very bad reputation, smoking. I think when I went to America, it was a while ago, I think it was almost the other way around, where smoking was more acceptable and alcohol less acceptable. But it's interesting how different cultures.
Mentioning that now, I've started to think that smoking is starting to make a comeback in a lot of movies and series, and a lot of new programs nowadays actually show smoking a lot more than they used to, let's say, 10 years ago. I honestly see a lot of the people now smoking in most movies and series. And at some point, I think this had reduced a lot. At least that's how it feels to me, or I've become more aware of it. I just notice it a lot more now. And a lot more than alcohol. Like, it's not shown as much.
Interesting. I guess there is something like, I guess you could say almost sexy about the smoking, the film star from the 50s with the classic smoking. And I think, yeah, there is something about it. Like, obviously, smoking's probably not good for you, but there is something undeniably attractive about it. Like, it's not vaping that people are doing because that's not as attractive for some reason. There's something about the cigar and cigarette.
Unfortunately, smoking is a long-term illness in that the smoke does damage my lungs. And yes, as I said, on my death certificate, maybe as a secondary death cause, it will have COPD. Yeah. Vaping, on the other hand, is immediate because it's been shown that vapors are at higher risk of developing blood clots in the lung from I'm not saying all vapes, but certain vapes. You know, they're getting almost, you know, vapors have only been going for 5, 10 years. Yeah, and in that short space of time, have needed more treatment than somebody that smokes a cigarette.
And I guess another big problem is you get people a lot younger generally, or at least it's like someone described it as the alcopops of smoking. It's because it's maybe easier for someone, say age 12, to get into because it tastes nice. They have all these nice flavors, and it's not got the discomfort you might get when you try your first cigarette.
Yeah.
You can also see how predatory the sales practices of vapes are with all these small, bright colors, making them fashionable, making them looking, very appealing, I think, to young people. So it's a lot more of a, marketed product than just a cigarette in this case.
Luckily, I mean, I've been following that, the government are banning single-use vapes, disposable vapes.
Yes, these were the ones I was talking about. Those small disposable ones that have all kinds of bright green, yellow, blue colors that people buy for on the cheap, and then they start getting into it.
It's probably not great for the environment, I imagine, either for single use.
No, not at all. But society's comes out with all these rules and all these regulations, and and we are expected to follow them. But that degree, I believe, decreases our own self-worth in a way. I feel like a second-class citizen because I'm having to stand out on the doorstep to have a cigarette while my friends are sat inside enjoying their pint of beer or their coffee. Or, I know from going abroad, in some of these European countries, they've made arrangements for smokers, where they can sit outside, still enjoy their coffee, still have a cigarette.
Yeah, I think looking at some European countries would be a good way to go for a lot of issues because they do generally seem healthier than us and our US counterparts. Even if they do drink maybe more alcohol than we do, they drink it in some maybe every meal of lunch and dinner, and they also smoke, but it's somehow they're still thin and they're still living longer than we are. So I think looking at what they're doing would be a smart move.
Yeah. They need to bring back those social points, the pubs, for want of a better word. They knocked down all these pubs and tried to centralise them so that it's easier to patrol for the police. But all these central pubs are also nightclubs. So you can't just go and sit down and have a quiet pint because there's all the music going on, there's all the shouting, all the screaming. Where the local pubs, they may have had a jukebox, but the music was never that loud that you had to shout over.
Yeah, it's a bugbear of mine as well. Like I went to a student bar where I'm at university yesterday, and just so loud and unnecessarily loud. And I don't. Maybe some people like it, but I think it just means you're really having to struggle to hear, and it just creates a lot more attention. Like if you're having a free flowing conversation, you don't want to be having to really be paying attention. You have to pay attention, otherwise the conversation goes off and you feel like you're not listening. So yeah, I think that's something which people don't talk about enough, which could be an easy change. I think people who run these bars and pubs sometimes almost assume that's what people want. I don't think they've ever really asked. They probably just assumed because everyone else is doing that, or because maybe some marketing company said this will get more people into your pub, then they do it. But I think it's a big problem.
I think the other thing that puts me off as well, like, restaurants. Yeah. Yes, there are some really good restaurants out there. But what I find difficult is I don't want to be sat there eating my meal and them playing music over my head, because I'm not then able to talk to the people that I'm having a meal with.
But this is what I'm saying. To me, this all brings it back to what I was saying about the reduction of third spaces for people to just go in and be able to connect and socialize in a way, and bringing it back to mental health. I just think all that is a huge contributing factor to people's declining mental health and increase of loneliness, depression, anxiety. All of it is coming back to this. So I don't know what we can do, but to me the answer seems to be to have more open spaces that are used for people to just go in and freely communicate and socialize.
But it's again back to society, and people are using spaces because they want to make money. You know, you and I have had this conversation before. You know, in this country, you go and sit in one of the coffee bars. You know, it's almost expected of you that once you've finished your coffee to up and go, because they want the table, because they want the next paying customer. You know, where especially in European countries, you could buy one coffee and still be sat there 3 hours later talking.
That's very true.
I myself found that very, very difficult at first, because as soon as I drank my coffee, I wanted to move on, even if that meant going to another cafe to have a coffee, because it was bred into me that once you finished your coffee, so they need to invest in places where people will feel comfortable to go and sit, to have a coffee or whatever, and feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, I wonder if it's also the like these coffee places might just spontaneously come up and be more relaxed like they perhaps are in other countries if it's not so much of an emphasis on money and needing to make money, like thinking that you need to keep up with others, but also just thinking you need to make money to provide for your family, and the cost of living has increased so massively that people are understandably all about making enough money, and so that comes at the cost of having these spaces which you might not make as much money, but you create a valuable space for people.
There was a TikTok influencer or whatever they call it, whatever they call them. He's a chef. He also suffers with mental health himself, and he started off just coming up and making easy meals for single people, individuals that, you know, he built himself up to the point where he was actually sort of producing sellable goods. He then took the money from that and started opening up what they called pop-up cafes. And it was just an empty shop. He'd take it for the day, and people just come in, have a snack, have coffee, sit, talk, and go. But they were not limited on the time that they could stay. If they wanted to be there 5 minutes, fine. If they wanted to be there 5 hours, fine.
That's a very good concept.
Yeah. I mean, the trust that I worked for, I'm going back to these. They partly run, or were partial ran, something called the Cafe Club. And it was only once a week, and it was also run under mine, was the other people involved. And they would just pick a cafe, and once a week, that would be the meeting place. You know, it got people out of the house and socialising with others.
Yeah.
They used to have luncheon clubs for over 60s, where, again, it was in community halls, pubs, wherever they could get a venue. One, it provided the older person with a hot meal, but it gave them that social ability where they met up with other people, or they were just sat indoors on their own.
Yeah.
That's what we need. We need more things like that.
It's quite simple in some ways. We don't need that much. We just need a place to come together with other people and maybe share a drink or a meal, which we've been doing for thousands of years. Yeah,
Yeah.
like surely we can make that available. So it's just increasing the quantity of that and the easiness to get there for people. Just removing as much of the barriers to go and do that. Because when you're maybe you're inside and you feel like you need to go outside, but actually you feel like you don't want to because it's, I don't know, there's just something safe about being at home, and it might be a lot of effort to go outside and go and do something. So reducing the barriers to go and do that, I think that's where a lot of effort.
I'm not trying to pick specific group. Somebody that is slightly on the frail side, or somebody that might be a bit unable to mobilize as well, having somewhere safe to go. Yeah. I'm sure that a lot of them would find £5, £10, whatever, to get a taxi both ways, just to be able to have that social time. Because a lot of these people, especially if they don't have family members, they rely on the care at home, and they see them for maybe 20 minutes a day. They have no other contact.
And it's often an unequal relationship, carer and caree. And not to say those relationships can't be good, but I think everyone benefits from having relationships where we are complete equals and there's no stakes of you're not giving me anything and I'm the receiver. It's an equal relationship.
It's not. It's that, but it's also like you go to a social club or a social day where you're going to get a hot meal. Yeah. You're going to make acquaintances. Over a period of time, that acquaintance becomes friends. So even if you only go once a week, yeah, the likelihood that both of you will have some form of communication device, whether it be a tablet, a phone. So you're then still getting that contact because you're phoning them and having a chat. But you're still meeting up at least once a week.
Therefore, by having, as you said, these third spaces that people can meet, they can develop social networks of friends, acquaintances, people that they can just even talk with when they need to, and help them support and navigate life in that way. So I think, again, bringing it back to mental health, social networks, third spaces, and
the
community,
but also the contribution that we can each offer each other. Because when we go out into the community, whether it's a sports club or just down the pub or whatever, we might see people who immediately need help because no one's going to fall down in our house. Well, less likely. So you just naturally encounter these things where people might need a little help or maybe a big help sometimes, or maybe you hear, oh, someone wants to volunteer for this place, and it just comes up in conversation. You're like, that sounds like something I might be interested in. It's quite close. I might go and check it out. There's a very natural way of integrating into the community.
There's also the practical side of it, yeah, especially in the elderly community, and maybe in the disabled community. Although you go to the day centre, this day club, and you start talking. You say, "Yeah, I really need a job being done in my house." Yeah. There is going to be somebody there, like say for me, for instance, who can turn around and say, well, my son-in-law is a builder decorator. He could come and do that job for you. Yes, you'd have to pay, but because you can't always trust, the business trade, shall we say.
Yeah.
So there's the practical side of it as well.
Yeah, I guess if maybe you're just talking about something, maybe you got something you need help with at the house, or maybe you need a certain tool or something, and the other person's like, oh yeah, I've got that tool, or someone else has got that tool, and they can come around later, and then you have another chat later. So it's just these things just spontaneously come about in many different guises. That's the small things which actually end up having a big effect.
I will say one last thing that don't keep it if you are suffering. don't keep it to yourself. There is any number of services out there, both for male and female, that that can be contacted. And one of the good ones is, my brain's gone. It's a call centre.
Samaritans?
Samaritans.
Samaritans.
The Samaritans are very good.
And I'm sure we can add some links underneath our video as well for a few pages, such as Samaritans, for example, and for anyone who's struggling. And I think they provide a lot of good support. And as you said, whoever is struggling should seek out help, because there is help out there. And with that, we can wrap up our today's Going Nowhere